Hey friends, my name is Jake. Welcome to Canadian Cutting Edge. Thank you for stopping by and watching one of my videos. This is a newer knife, fairly new, from Ganzo. This is the G806. I did a little video talking about how after I did the unboxing, a lot of people were saying this is a clone. It's a clone of the Mora knife. And so I posted a little video about it, and I did it a little bit tongue-in-cheek, sort of hidden, talking about how it's not, and a lot of people were still saying that it is. A few people figured it out because, you know, some people are really in the know more than others. No. It's actually a copy of the Benchmade 200 Puko. And it's a fairly close copy in design, at least the knife. The sheath is a lot like a Mora knife. The Benchmade version of this, it's got a leather, dangle sheath, but, they totally changed, sort of a Mora-esque kind of sheath. And I think that's what really threw a lot of people off, saying, that's a Mora! Or just like a Mora. It's similar. That's similar to a Mora sheath, and this is quite a bit similar to a Benchmade 200 Puko. Now, the Benchmade 200 Puko has CPM 3V steel, which is a high-end steel. White Mountain Knives sells that knife for $127.95 US. That's before discount. Discount code CC at White Mountain Knives saves you 10%. This knife I didn't get from White Mountain Knives. They don't have this knife. This is a pretty decent knife for the amount of money that you pay. That's a spoiler alert. I'm going to review this now, and I'm going to end up telling you that if you want a fixed blade knife, you could do a whole lot worse than this for under 20 bucks. $17.95 US for this knife at Amazon. That's a pretty good price. It comes four ways. There's this all black version, and then there's one with blue highlights and a blue sheath, and orange and green. So yeah, there's like four ways to get this thing. Do you want to know the details about this thing? Well, come on down. We're going to go to the tabletop. We're going to take a good close look at this. I'll leave links down below the video, referral links for Amazon, so that if you want to buy one of these, please use my referral link. I'll get 10-15 cents per purchase back, and that'll help me out. I'm still trying to save up some more money to get another lens for that camera right there. And yeah, so let's get started. Come on down. I've been reviewing Ganzo knives for a long time. I've reviewed loads of them. Now, Ganzo's got a long history of finding knives that are on the market and then making a very, very low budget version of that knife. Some people have a huge issue with that. Other people don't. Now, about 6 years ago or so, I made a video about my opinion on that, so I'm not going to rehash all of that here. It's a very old, fairly low quality video, but the ideas that I discuss in there, I still basically believe them. I'll link it here and I'll link it down below if you want to watch that. Clearly, I am not completely against, this type of homage to the Benchmade knife. Is this knife competing? That's the main idea. Is this knife actually competing with the Benchmade 200 Puko? And I don't think so. And that's the main reason why, I find it to be okay, to review this kind of knife. I'm not really suggesting that people buy this instead of the Benchmade. Not a chance. The Benchmade version is many times better than this Ganzo version. But that doesn't mean this Ganzo version is complete garbage either. And that's about all I'm going to say on the subject here. First, let's talk about the sheath a little bit. They don't tell us at the Ganzo website what material this is. It's some kind of poly, some kind of plastic. I doubt it's an ABS because that's a little bit more expensive, but it might be. But it's a decent ambidextrous sheath. The blade goes in either way. So you can put it in, cutting edges this way. I can turn it over, it goes in that way, locks in either way. So it's completely ambidextrous. So that's a good thing. And, you got a drain hole down there. It's not heavy at all. I like the belt loop that you've got this little section right here that comes back up. That means when your belt's in there, this will be my belt substitute, and the knife is in here, You know, my belt's not going to move, so when I pull on this, it's going to come out. And I'm making a mess of everything over here. So the belt's not going to come loose or anything, but all I have to do is do that, pull this out, and then I can slide it off the belt. So pretty nice. Just don't bend it too far and fatigue this and make it get weak. So there you go. This hole in here, I think that's just to save a little bit of weight. The Moros most of them have this little buttonhole kind of thing and a hook system, so you can hook them together and daisy chain them, if you will. Yeah, you can't do that with this. But that's the sheath. And we'll go through all the specs of the weights and everything later on. Now the handle material on this thing, this is polypropylene and thermoplastic rubber combined. And the thermoplastic rubber is this middle section, and the polypropylene is on either end. Now, on the three different colored versions, you know, the polypropylene is a different color than this TPR section in the middle. We've got very similar kind of pattern on here as the Benchmade does. You know, you've got this sort of check pattern in here. A little bit extra texture in there, looks kind of like jimping. It is a bit soft, and I even took it outside. You know, when it's pretty cold, like quite a bit below zero, this does get hard, and it's a hard surface. But at least it's not super cold on the hand. It feels decent in the naked hand, at least in warmer temperatures, and in a gloved hand, it's quite good as well. As long as your hands aren't too small. This thing is really designed, it fits best, I think, in hands that are, you know, the bigger side of men's medium, closer to men's large and bigger. You know, can have a pretty good grip on this thing. I'm just barely into the XL range, and as you can see, there's extra room in the handle. Feels good, comfortable. We've got a hole back here, good placement for that hole for a lanyard, if that's what you want to use. How far back does the steel go? Let me find my magnet here. So obviously it's steel there, and the magnet's hanging on. And let's just push it back until it falls off. It's still there, still there, still there, still there. See, it's still hanging on. And keep pushing back, and it falls off there. So the steel goes way back to here, which I'm quite happy with it. For the length of blade, the steel coming back almost the whole way. Now, how deep is the steel this way? You know, it's probably ½ an inch all the way back, maybe even a tiny bit less. It's a very common way of making knives. Knives have been made like that for generations and generations and generations, and it's just fine. You don't have to have a full exposed tang for it to be strong. Now, is a full exposed tang stronger? Yes, but this is plenty strong, especially for what this knife is. Talking about the blade now, what do we got? We've got a drop point blade. We've got a saber grind. That's a flat grind that comes up over half of the way up the blade. Well, it doesn't have to come over halfway to be saber grind, but it's got a nice point on there for piercing, because the angles here are quite shallow this way, and it's coming to a decent point. It pierces quite well. The thickness behind the grind and everything, we'll talk about that in just a little while. It's not bad. Sharpener's choil, it's a little too small. We've got a stonewash finish on this steel, and badging, it says G806 there, and below it, it says 8CR14. 8CR14 is a pretty good steel. 8CR14 can easily be made to, you know, about 59 Rockwell, but Ganzo says they've done it to 56. So I will sharpen this later on, and I'll put the text on the screen now. I'm not going to sharpen it during this video, but before I've finished editing it, and I'll put it on the screen here, how soft I think that this is, you know, from my, it's still subjective, but I've got a lot of experience sharpening, and during sharpening you can tell how hard something is, so that information was on the screen there. Nice and thin behind the edge. This knife cuts quite well. The sharpness from the factory is quite good. I think it's a good knife. It's fairly thin here, and I'll give you the exact measurements later on. It's not a super heavy duty knife, but it's a decent camping knife, especially if you do car camping or RV camping or whatever, you know, and you just want a knife with you when you're outside doing stuff around the campsite and, you know, just basically enjoying life. But this is not a heavy-duty knife. It's not like a high, hard use kind of knife, but it's a pretty good, just outdoors basic knife. Being thin like this, it's not a great knife for batoning, you know, because it's so thin that your stick that you're going to use is going to start breaking in there, but the steel can handle it. I did some batoning testing, and I used, you know, a hardwood stick so that it wouldn't just break apart, and it batons okay. Could you use it to skin a critter? Of course you could. It's not terrible for that. Don't really like such a pointy tip for that unless you don't care about piercing through the hide all the time, but it's a usable knife. The other badging on this knife, I didn't say this side yet, we've got Ganzo on the flat there. I'd prefer that be a little bit smaller and maybe up closer to the handle, but hey, it's not terrible. At least it's not black, you know, it's just sort of that laser etched finish right in there. There's no tear down for this video because there's nothing to tear down. So now let's just go over the specs. The weight of this thing is 86 grams, 3.03 ounces. Pretty light. The weight of this, 29 grams, 1.02 ounces. So together, 115 grams, 4.05 ounces. 4 ounces for this size knife, not bad at all. The sharpness from the factory, 180 bes, which is just slightly worse than average from what I review, so that's not bad either. The cutting edge length, so between my thumbnails, 97.3 millimeters, 3.83 inches. The blade length from the tip to the closest spot on the handle is 99.7 millimeters, 3.93 inches. Almost 4 inches there. The thickness of the steel, 2.24 millimeters, 0.088 of an inch. And the blade depth, that's this measurement, it's biggest right here at the heel of the blade, 26.1 millimeters, 1.03 inches. How thick is it behind the grind? I measured it in about 4 or 5 places. The average is 0.48 millimeters, 19 thousandths of an inch. So that's within the tolerances of what I like. I like it to be 20 thousandths or less, preferably less, and this is just a tiny bit less. The grind angles on this knife, it's not ground all that well. This side's got an average of 21.4 degrees. This side's got an average of 13.2 degrees. Started at 12.5 degrees, went to 13.9 degrees, 1.4 degrees of change. This side started at 21.4 degrees, ended at 19.6 degrees, and was, you know, consistently going down along the length. That's 3.7 degrees of change, so not all that well done. Depending on how I would use this, I'd sharpen it between 18 to 20 degrees per side. Now for the handle length, 118.5 millimeters, 4.66 inches. The thickness of the handle at the thickest point, 19.5 millimeters, 0.768 of an inch. The handle depth, its biggest right about here, 30.2 millimeters, 1.19 inches. And the grip area between my thumbs is about 10.5 centimeters, a little over 4 inches, about 4.15 inches roughly, just rounded just slightly. And the total length of this thing, rounded to the nearest millimeter, 218 millimeters, 8.58 inches. So 8.5 inches, almost 4, you know, and a little bit over 4. Those proportions aren't bad. Oh, I didn't show you the balance point before. The balance point is right about there, which is not bad. Wouldn't mind it being just a little bit forward, but that's not bad at all. So it would be a little bit more forward if they would have had the steel coming even further back, but not bad at all. So how much does this knife cost? The cheapest place to get this, especially if you're in America, is Amazon. And use my Amazon link, $17.95 US for this knife, and you get free shipping. It comes in all 4 colors, except the orange one is listed as a different product, so it's listed separately. So I've got, you know, multiple links down below. The thing is, the main 3 colors, they won't ship to Canada, but the person who's selling the orange one will ship to Canada. Are there cheaper places to get it? Yes, there are cheaper places. If you're in Canada, the cheapest place to get this thing is AliExpress for just a little bit more. For Americans, if Amazon is sold out, $19 US at AliExpress for this with no shipping. But if you're in Canada, it's $26.91 Canadian plus $8.70 Canadian for shipping, $35.61 total. there you go. I'll leave all those links down below to make it easy for you to pick one of these up, because I think it's a pretty cool little knife. What's my summary of this thing? I think it's a nice knife for the price. I like that the steel comes back really far. Now, we don't know exactly how wide that steel is, but it's probably the same thickness as the rest all the way back. It only makes sense. The sheath, it's very usable. It's a great little camp knife. You know, you can do all kinds of stuff with it. You know, would this be a primary carry? Probably not, but it's a decent knife. The retention's good, so I like that. Okay things, I think the sharpener's choil is a little bit too small. The badging, it's not that big a deal. I wouldn't mind if this was a full 1/8 of an inch. I would prefer it if it was a bit thicker. That would be quite a bit stronger of a knife, and then I would like it quite a lot more. Of course, it'd be a little bit heavier that way too. So just over 4 ounces, just barely over 4 ounces. If you've got the space, this is a good knife to take along if you're going hiking and you're going to need a knife just to do basic food prep, maybe a tiny bit of, you know, wood bushcraft kind of stuff. You know, not a lot. You're not going to be building complete shelters and stuff. But if you want something along that you can afford, like really, really inexpensive, and, you know, if it breaks, you're not going to be brokenhearted. You want something really low cost. Or if you're creating bug out bags that you're putting into multiple places, you know, some guys do that. Some guys like prepping like crazy. It's a stainless steel that's fairly corrosion resistant and very inexpensive. And you could, you know, get multiples of these. Like you could get 6 of these for the price of one Benchmade, you know, just roughly speaking, depending on how much you're paying and where you're shopping and stuff. The other thing, and I'll talk about it now for the people that have watched all the way through, that I like about copies like this that Ganzo makes, is you buy the copy if you're not sure, and the general ergonomics of the thing is here. And if you end up liking this, and then you want to get the higher end version, you already know that you're going to like it. What really sucks is when you spend, you know, $150 on a knife, and then I don't really like it. And then you got to sell it on the aftermarket and stuff. And maybe you've done a little bit of damage or scratched it or something, and then you can't sell it for an awful lot. Buying a cheap version of it, at least cheap in terms of price, it's cheaper in quality too. It just is. But you can get used to the knife and make that decision. At least that's my opinion. Opinions may vary, and it's totally fine if you've got a totally different view on, you know, knife companies copying what other knife companies do. If you hate that, that's completely fine. I won't argue with you. It's a valid argument. I can see the validity to that argument. But I just don't see that Ganzo is taking any money away from Benchmade. And they're not taking any money away from Mora either. Because if you want a Mora, you'll buy a Mora. If you want a Scandi grind, you'll buy a Mora. If you want a grind like this, well, there is a Mora out there like this, if you can find it. So get what you want. There's nothing wrong with getting something different than what I'm reviewing. I find it odd that some people leave comments like I'm trying to be a salesman. I'm trying to review this. I really don't care if you buy it or not. That makes no difference to me whatsoever. But if you are going to buy it, I'm happy if you use my links. Thank you to my supporters. You guys are awesome. I appreciate your help an awful lot. And while I'm editing this, I'm also getting ready for the next knife sale. So turn your notifications on. Click that bell down below. Certainly, hopefully, you've hit the subscribe button. And you'll be notified when the sale comes. And if you're one of my supporters on Patreon, I'm going to send out Patreon notifications as well. So remember, friends, always cut towards your chum, not your thumb.